joining us today for this webinar. For people who haven't met me before, my name's Andy, and I'm a Google certified trainer and innovator based in the UK, and today I'm down in Google's London office. And then looking after the chat and also letting everyone in through the door is Fiona. We'll let Fiona concentrate on that. But hi, Fiona, from the team at Google for Education. So we're both around should you want to ask any questions, and feel free as we go through today's call. As Fiona mentioned earlier, if you've got questions, pop them in the chat. There's a time slot at the end of the call where we'll answer lots of questions from the chat space. So feel free to pop those in there. And also, as some folks are already doing, feel free to use an emoji as well. And it would be really nice to find out if has anyone on the call been on NotebookLM before. So if you've already been on NotebookLM, maybe you've used it, it's been in Glow for about a week now. Feel free to give us a thumbs up emoji for anyone that's used it. And thank you to all the people who have already been and used it. Great to see some people already experiencing Notebook inside Glow. So let's get into today's webinar. We're going to dig into NotebookLM in detail. So NotebookLM is one of two tools that's available inside Glow for you to use. So Gemini has been in there for quite some time now at gemini.google.com. And Gemini is a good example of generative AI. And when you're using generative AI, you're often writing in a prompt. And those of us that have used AI know that we often have to write quite long prompts. And sometimes when we're writing a long prompt into Gemini, we're doing it because we're trying to narrow down the content. So sometimes when I'm using Gemini, I might write that I'm a geography teacher, that I'm teaching a particular syllabus, that I'm teaching a particular year group. And the reason why I'm writing all that detail in is to narrow it down to the right topic. So someone at Google had an idea that maybe we could do an AI product that's sort of the other way around. Gemini is trained on huge amounts of material. What about if we started with an AI tool that was based on nothing, and we allowed the end user to put their own content and their own material in? So it's almost like your own little tool as opposed to a great big AI tool. And that means we can create little AI tools that are very specific for the content we want. And there's lots of different use cases. We're going to talk about lots of them today. And so NotebookLM is almost like the opposite of Gemini. Gemini is huge and it's got a big training library of material. And NotebookLM initially isn't. It's small and has got only the material you give it. So we're going to dig in and show it you in a second, but that's just sort of an overview of what this is. And as we mentioned, NotebookLM, we're really excited to say, is now available inside Glow. All the Glow resources are available over on the Glow blog, but I've just very conveniently taken this slide from those resources to talk about how do you access NotebookLM. So if you log into Glow and then go onto your local authority launchpad and the left-hand side menu, you'll be able to see there's a specific tile inside Glow for NotebookLM. And this is really useful because NotebookLM hasn't yet got an icon in the waffle menu inside Google. So it's actually really useful that you can get to it straight from Glow to NotebookLM because it's such a new product, it hasn't rolled out into Google's sort of links menus yet. So get to it that way. And remember that you can also inside Glow, you can pin tiles to your own app library. So if you find it really useful, feel free to pin Notebook yourself so it's easy for you to get to straight from your home page in Glow. So that's how to get to it. Now let's talk a little bit about what it is and how we use it. So this is what the home page of NotebookLM looks like. And it's broken down to three key sections. And I'm about to switch across in a second to show you a notebook, but it's broken down to three key sections. On the left-hand side, there's an area called Sources, and that's where you put the material that you want it to use. In the middle area, it's got the sort of the chat space, and like lots of generative AI, we can ask it questions and it will give responses to that. And on the right-hand side, there's an area called Studio. And Studio is where we can create new content based on the information we've given it. So I'm going to switch my tab now, and we're going to have a quick look at what it looks like when we use NotebookLM from the very start. So I've just gone in NotebookLM and I've gone to Create New. And this is the first page that pops up when you create a brand new notebook. So obviously it can't start until it's actually got some information to create the AI off. And so it's giving me some choices here. It says I can upload sources, so I can put in things like PDFs and text. And if I've got things I want to put in there, I can put it in through just uploading it. Or if I've got things in Google Docs and Google Slides, I can upload it down there by linking my Google Drive in. Or if it's something on the web, it says here I can link websites and YouTube. So if I've got a YouTube video that I want to use, I can put that into YouTube there. I think websites is not perhaps the best word to use down there, and a better word would be web page. Because when you go to the website option, you put the web address in for the web page you want, it only looks at the page you tell it. So a lot of people think if they put, like, you know, the homepage of their school website in, it will read the whole school website. It won't read every page in your website. Simply use the website link there. And then on the right-hand side, we've got copied text where you can copy and paste text. So you choose the sources of information that you want to put in to give access to. So in this case, I'm going to go to choose. I'm going to go to choose file because I'm going to upload something. And in this case, I'm just going to upload. In this case, a policy, a school policy on mobile phones. So at the left-hand side now, you can see my sources. I've got my school mobile phone policy, and over here it's sort of talking a bit about the school mobile phone policy. Read the information in that. I've now got effectively here an AI policy that is great on school mobile phones. It knows what my school policy is, but it doesn't know anything else. It's not going to be able to tell me other things, but it's an AI model that knows about this policy. So if I then had a question, maybe I want to know what is the policy for sixth year. So if I want to know what those students are allowed, maybe my policy varies by different ages, it might talk about how that might change. And these little references here are references to specific things within the policy. So it's referring back to itself, it's referring back to that one policy in that space. So effectively, I've got an AI chatbot now that is based off my policy. And sometimes having a notebook LM that's based off one thing can be useful. Because maybe I've got parents emailing me, asking me questions about the policy, and I've got to respond to those parents. And so what I might want to do at this point is I might want to just, you know, put this in here and say, can you help me write a response to this question from a parent? But can you, write it in line with my school policy? And obviously it will do that because it's been trained on the specific school policy. So sometimes a notebook of one source can be a really useful thing to have. So we've got the middle area, which is our chat space. We've got the ability to ask questions, which we saw down there at the bottom when we were working with it earlier. And then over on the right-hand side here, we've got this area where we can create new content, and that's our studio area. So we've got some options here coming up. So the first thing it says is a deep dive conversation. And this is known as the audio overview inside NotebookLM. I'm not going to press it now. I'm going to show you an example in a second of one I've already done. But if I press generate, Notebook will take the content I've given it and generate an audio overview. So an audio podcast, for want of a better word, based on the information we've given it. That audio overview is presented by two people. So it's a dialogue, it's a conversation between two different voices talking to each other about the content that you uploaded. So it's a different way of interacting with the content. So I might decide I want to do that with it, if that's relevant. Below that, it gives me some other options for things I could build out of what I've already uploaded. So I can add a note. In this case, it's offering me the chance to build a study guide, an FAQ, because maybe I want to create an FAQ document for parents, a briefing doc, because maybe I want to build a summary. Maybe my policy is 25 pages long, and I just want a really short sort of summary of what that is about. Or if relevant, and it probably isn't relevant for the mobile phone policy, but if I had specific things in date order, or I was collecting information over a period of time, and I've got dates within the content, within the source material, I could build a timeline. So there are different things I can build there. And sometimes you'll also see, and sometimes if it's not over there, it's in the middle area, the option to build a mind map. And that's what I'm going to show you first today. So I'm going to press mind map, and as you can see over here, it says generating mind map. So what it's doing now is it's looking at my source documentation. In this case, it's looking at the mobile phone policy, and it's creating a mind map of the content that's over there. So in this case, it's broken that policy down into the different areas of the policy and how that policy might work and what the different areas. So maybe I would look at this in there, and then I can spin into more areas here. So it's a sort of a mind map of the content, make that full screen, a mind map of the content that is contained in that policy. Now, sometimes when I'm working with different users of NotebookLM, and they go to the policy and they go to the mind map, they say, "Oh, the mind map isn't quite what I expected it to be. Maybe it focuses heavily on one area." And that might happen when your actual source documentation does the same thing. So imagine I was writing a mobile phone policy and maybe I overly focused in one space. Maybe I wrote a lot of content about a particular area. It will cause the mind map to focus in that area. Sometimes looking at the mind map can tell me if the original material, particularly on creating myself, is balanced and reflective of what I want it to be. So once I create content in Studio, whether it's the audio overview, whether it's the mind map, whatever it is that I'm creating, I then have the option here to download it. So I've got a download button there, and I can bring it off that way. So, and that was one I was just creating live. Let me show you a couple more examples of different pieces. And I'm also going to show you what the audio, listening to what the audio view looks like. So these are some examples of the one. Here's another one based on the Scottish policy for additional support for learning policy in Scotland. So it's a good example sometimes where there might be a new policy coming out from the Scottish government, and I might want to ask it questions and find out about it. And maybe that policy is very long. The additional support for learning policy document is quite a lengthy one, and maybe I want to understand it. So I've got the option here to build content off that. I'm actually going to see if this other one's loading in. I've got another one I'm going to show you because that's one example. Or I might decide I'm going to upload multiple sources. So let me share this one instead. So this is the Getting It Right for Every Child documentation. So in this case, I've taken all of that documentation. And there's a lot of different things out there for getting it right for every child. So this is a notebook based on multiple sources of information. So again, it's got that knowledge of all the different sort of information that's been put out on that one particular topic. So I can ask it questions. Now, you'll notice when I put multiple sources in, as it starts to get the idea of what I'm creating, I get this button at the top called Discover. And Discover allows me to actually go and find further information. So if sometimes I'm trying to build an expansive notebook around things, and maybe I haven't got a lot of information myself on a topic, I can also discover wider sources. So I'm looking at Getting It Right for Every Child. In Scotland. So let's put that in and see what it finds. And what it will then do is it will go and search the web and other sources of information to see if it can find any other relevant information that I might want to add to my notebook. So it's gone and found things on Wikipedia. It's found some official policy guidance. So sometimes if you want to, you can use that instead of having to go over to the internet, find more information and train up yourself. You can use Discover to expand your notebooks out more. So you don't just have to use things you've got. You can use this wider piece to bring wider content in. Once you've done that, this one I've already loaded in the podcast. So let's have a listen to what it says about this particular policy.
The right support at the right time to reach their full potential. That's quite a statement, isn't it?
It is. And it's really the driving force behind getting it right for every child, or GIRFF in Scotland.
GIRFF. Right. It sounds like more than just a slogan, though.
Oh, definitely. It's the actual national framework they've put in place, trying to make that.
Now, you'll notice that, and I hope that sound audio was coming through, but you'll notice that it's two people having a conversation. And the reason it's two people is if you have a look at the podcast charts, you'll notice that a conversation between two people is far more popular than just listening to one person. If it was a single voice, then after a while that would become boring and not as interesting to listen to. But two people having sort of a dialogue, one asking a question, the other answering, is a much more interesting listen. One of the things we get asked about a lot is about the voices in there, because it's two American voices and it would be far better to hear some localized voices, at least down to UK, and some Scottish accents in there as well would be great. Google are aware of that, and there's a lot of features sort of in the roadmap for NotebookLM, but one of them is the choice somewhere in that roadmap. So at some point in the future, we will see a little bit more choice with the voices coming along now, and also you can start to see more languages coming in as well and different things. So at the moment it is those two American characters, but they're not horrendous, but we do all want more choices of voice in there. So we've got that, and you can obviously listen to your podcast. Once you've got your podcast, if you're happy with it, you could then choose to download it. And usually at this point, I get asked a bit about students. So NotebookLM is an 18+ product. It can't be used by students. This is something for adults to use. But obviously, when it's generating content, when it's creating content that we could use, we can then download some of that content to bring across into our teaching. So it could be you give it some information, it creates a podcast. This is great. This is a lovely summary of the topic I'm teaching to my students. So I'll pull the podcast down and share that with them in Google Classroom or whatever it is you use to create that content. So you can still use it to create content in that space if you choose to go that way. And the audio podcast is a good example of that. Likewise, you probably saw it earlier in the mind map. We can bring that off as a document, and any of these other things like the study guide or the briefing doc, they can all be brought off as content if you want to bring it off in that way. So feel free to bring content back. So that's the interface, the 3 areas of the interface. Let's talk about sharing. So you'll notice I've got the sort of very standard Google Share button at the top of my notebook. So I can go to Share here, and I get the option to share this with other people. So I can, it's a very traditional Google thing. I can put their email address in and I can give them access to my notebook. Right now, you can only share notebooks with people who are inside your organization. So they are internal sharing. You can't make a publicly viewable notebook. You can't make a notebook any wider than your own organization. So you can share it with the teachers that you work with, but you can't share it with someone in Scotland or someone in Australia. They will be able to access this. So you've got share in that space. When it comes to sharing, because NotebookLM is such a new product right now, there is a little issue that some users run into, which is when they press share, they share it with someone who's never been on NotebookLM before and it won't find them. If you run into that problem, and that will get fixed at some point soon, but if you run into that issue, just ask that person to go on NotebookLM. It sort of wakes it up. If they've never been on it before, sometimes Notebook can't find them to share it with them because they haven't got any sort of notebook space yet. So if they're having that problem where you're typing in someone's email and you're like, I'm sure this email address is correct, get that person to go on NotebookLM, click on it once, and then you'll be able to do shares with them. So that means we could create a notebook for use across our school. We can share it with people and then they can use it, they can access it, they can ask it questions. So once you're building notebooks, you're doing that there. So we've got the share button up top there, and that allows us to do that. In terms of some limits on NotebookLM, there's a limit in terms of sources. At the moment, it's 50 sources of information. So on the left-hand side here, you can upload up to 50 pieces of information into that piece. Don't forget, if you do push it and you're running out of space, I don't know if Fiona's on the call listening to me saying this on a Google call, but you can always merge some of those PDFs together to make it even longer if you really want to get it around in that way. Or you could just make multiple notebooks, couldn't you? If you've got that much 50 documents, you might want to split it out into separate topics. So feel free to use it that way and do it that way as we go through. So let me come back into my slides to just make sure I've covered a few things. I'm going to ask in a second, while I'm just going through these slides to make sure I've covered things, I'm going to ask some people in chat in a minute to share how they might have used Notebook. So people who've used Notebook before, if you want to start thinking about how you've used it, we're going to get to some examples sharing in chat. So we talked about where things are in NotebookLM, and let's talk about privacy. So it's a core NotebookLM, just like Gemini, is a core service inside Google Workspace. And that means it follows the same privacy settings you have set on your domain. And therefore, when you upload a file to NotebookLM, it's very similar to the security that will be in place when you upload that file to Google Drive. So think of it in the same sort of format. None of your data is reviewed or looked at by the AI inside NotebookLM. Your data remains your data. Obviously, you can access it and use it, but there's no way that your data doesn't leak into Gemini or Google's large language model as a result of using NotebookLM. So your data is always private to the user, but you should, of course, always follow your organization's own policies around using AI and be mindful of not putting in sensitive information to NotebookLM, as you would with any AI tool. So we talked about that. We've mentioned those features. We talked about the data protection. We talked about audio overviews. I've covered those things. We talked about uploading chat and create areas. This is just a recap, really, to make sure I've covered things. Multimodal. So the word multimodal is the word we use when we talk about lots of different types of information. Early on, generative AI was predominantly text. You'd write some text in, it would respond with text. But multimodal means it can take multiple things. So we've seen you can upload audio into NotebookLM as a file. So if you record some audio at a meeting, you could upload that in. You can upload YouTube videos in there, so it can take video content in there. And obviously coming out the other way, you can output audio as well. And that's what we mean by multimodal. NotebookLM is a good example of a multimodal AI product. It'd be great to find out at this point, some people had already admitted earlier on to using NotebookLM. If there's some good examples and people would like to share in the chat some good examples of how they've used NotebookLM. In a second, I will also, I'm seeing lots of questions bubbling through as well. So after we've done examples, I'm going to jump over to start answering that big list of questions. So feel free, there's loads of questions in there. But while you're doing that, it'd be good to have some examples of different people who might have uploaded, might have used NotebookLM, and particularly from the context of supporting your work in Scotland. So I'm going to give you a second or two for some people to put that in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to nip up the top of the chat. I'm going to mention a couple of things. So the first thing I'm going to mention is Martin very helpfully earlier on in the chat put in some links to some of the apps that have been produced. NotebookLM now has both a Google Play Store app for Android devices, and it has an iOS app for Apple devices. Obviously, it would depend upon the policies of your local authority if you're going to deploy them. Just a reminder that if you're using Chromebooks, the best way of accessing NotebookLM is on the web-based interface. So the Android app was built really for a mobile interface. So we wouldn't normally push a Play app to Chromebooks. We'd stick to the web-based interface on a Chromebook. But if you're going obviously into other mobile technology, then definitely use the two mobile apps that are available for NotebookLM. So thanks for popping those in there earlier. I'm going to keep coming back to questions. Oh, we've got examples in now. So we've got loads of examples coming in. So good, I can share some examples. Right, so someone's used it to create a podcast of a unit of work and share with students. That's a really good example of just being able to quickly create content. Ross has used it to provide summaries of reports that I need to become familiar with. Yeah, particularly when there's multiple sort of content hitting, you want to amalgamate it into one. Is a really good way of doing that. Thank you, Ross, for sharing. Don't know the first name, but Jay Slow has added multiple sources to explain a tricky part of the higher course, created an audio chat for people to listen to. Worked quite well, but we'll try it again and stress and pass the course. Yeah, if you want to narrow it down in terms of that podcast, limit what you're putting in as the sources. So I did it as a geography teacher. I originally uploaded all my syllabuses, and the podcast was sort of too broad. And then I created separate notebooks for sort of rivers and coasts and my different topics. And that way I got podcasts that were just topic specific. So that's a way of breaking it down for doing that way. Jay Reich, I've inputted my revision booklets to create podcasts for students. They like it. That's a good one. Uploaded the school inspection reports for an ASG to look for commonalities and feedback. That's a really interesting sort of leadership one there. Looking at school inspection reports. That's a good one. As a teacher, I like to use NotebookLM as a one-stop shop for AI support needs. I've seen a few teachers have done this. They've uploaded how to use AI guides and then using it for like an AI assistant, but how to use AI. So using AI to how to use AI, it's a bit of a double loop. But yeah, summary of the strategy. So I created a mind map which you keep referring to. Thank you, P. McDonald. That's another great use of how you might use this. Another one, a couple of perhaps more outside of the standard use of using it for syllabuses and students. Some people I find are using it to create, particularly when their job involves sort of dealing with certain pieces of content. So particularly things like for senior leadership, things like funding bids, where there's a criteria or a document you've got to fill in. So you can give it the criteria and ask it, give it the information on your school and ask it to help with that, is another example. And one that's really outside of our standard teacher world, but as a school site services manager recently tells me they use it a lot for building regulations. They've trained it on building regs and now it knows all the rules for buildings, and they can use it in that way. So don't just think about, as teachers, we've got some great uses, but it might step wider into that wider admin space as well. Thank you, lots of people, for sharing different ways we can use it in the chat. There's a wealth of resources available, and Susan and the Glow team have done some amazing work on providing a knowledge hub on using NotebookLM that's definitely worth checking out. And I'll get Fiona or Susan to drop the link in the chat in a second, or if Susan around, she can drop the link straight into the Glow Knowledge Hub in the chat in a second, or I'll do it at the end. But there's some really good stuff on there. There is a video about how to use Glow. There's some of the slides that I've shared in terms of the content. So feel free, if you want to support that, you want to get your teachers using this, to lean upon the Knowledge Hub. Some great work going on to produce this and get this ready for launch in Scotland. So firstly, big thank you to Susan for that. And in there's this really good document. This is probably one of the best things I've seen anywhere in the world for NotebookLM, which is the Quick Start Guide. And it's a step-by-step process for creating that content. I've sort of walked you through a lot of this today, where we talk about uploading sources and using the chat and then creating study guides, briefing documents, audio overviews. That is a one-pager. Lots of love for you, Susan, in the emojis. It's a really good document for supporting you and your staff getting started with NotebookLM. So at that point, I'm going to sort of dig into the questions, and there's been quite a few questions coming through in chat. So I'm going to start up the top and just work my way through. And if this is the point where you've got questions, you ask. So is there any way to change the voices? Alan asked earlier, not yet. Feel free always to keep telling Google that. I've feature requested it about 500 times. Feel free to keep asking that. But I think at some point we'll see a variation in voices. Can you get a transcript of the deep dive, then to upload to another AI system to generate a video, etc.? You could put the audio back in to actually something like Gemini and ask it to give you a transcript. So you could use that to do. So you could create content in Notebook and then go over to Gemini for things like transcripting that. Fiona, is your hand up to answer that question a bit?
So there's a little workaround there. Although there isn't a direct feature to say download transcript, if you on your audio overview, if you click the three dots, download the transcript as an audio file, and then if you add that audio file as one of your sources, it produces a transcript of any audio source that you add in. So you get a transcript of the audio overview that way. Takes about a minute, but a handy little workaround, but there isn't a direct button yet. You've muted yourself, Andy, sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Fiona. The next question was one that came in from Roz, who said, I'd be able to find an option to save the text in the chat. Let me show you a really useful tip for dealing with that. So if I come over to my one that I was playing around with earlier, my school mobile phone policy, you can see I've got this output here. At the bottom of the output here, you get some options. Save to note keeps it inside NotebookLM, but there's this copy option here. Use that copy option there as opposed to doing this. A lot of people do this. They can just highlight and right-click copy and right-click paste. But when you do that, you get all these messy sort of little numbers come out, and they don't come out very well in the original. So if you use that button there, it sort of creates the text in the pure text form, and then you paste it to where you want it. So that's the best way of bringing text out if you want to do that. So hopefully that answered Roz's comment. Moira was uploading some things that I think the document was wearing. Sometimes I literally just cancel and go again is one option, because sometimes it just sort of stutters on a document for various reasons. And the other thing I sometimes do is try, sometimes documents work better in different formats. So if you're struggling uploading a document, maybe it's in Word, try it as a PDF instead, try different formats. PDFs suck in particularly well because they're very clean text. So sometimes I'll do that. And you'll also notice that as of yet, it'll take docs and slides, but not yet sheets. But of course, you could take the sheet, put a PDF in and stick it in that way. So there are ways, again, of getting in at this point. Google will probably build more options over time for different inputting. So that's that question. I'm just going for any more questions at the bottom now.
Andy, there's another really cool feature as well that it's only just come out, I think, last Tuesday. If you look at if you go back to NotebookLM settings in the top right-hand corner,
yeah,
and you can put your output language. So it was only English originally, and hopefully on your versions you can see a huge number of languages now. It's over 80 languages. So if you were creating something as a modern foreign language teacher, then this might be another useful resource.
Yeah, to be able to change the language from the source language you're working.
Yeah, just came out last week.
Thank you for that. Good catch, Fiona. Let me come back to my question tab. So just making sure there's where do we get to? Down the chat, and we had so can I add a YouTube video and have it made into a deep dive short conversation? Yes, you can. So you could put a YouTube video in as a source, and then you could then go straight to the audio conversation, press create, it will create the audio conversation, talk about the YouTube video. So Anne-Marie have answered that question. And then Martin asked a question about VO3. So VO3 is Google's video creation tool. So at the moment, there are only audio overviews available inside NotebookLM. There's been some talk that there might be video overviews coming soon. Fiona's mentioned that as well, but we don't have any real timeline on that. You can imagine that if we can create audio, maybe at some point it might be able to create a video as well. But at this point, we don't know any timeline on that. But it's been sort of strongly rumoured. So will this always be 18 plus? Will there be a way to create a tie-down model for students to interact with? So at the moment, NotebookLM, like lots of other AI tools, is 18 plus. Obviously, Google are continuing to sort of monitor what's appropriate for students in that space. And then slowly over time, tools often have the age reduced. So you may have seen that Gemini in some parts of the world now has a lower age limit. But Google's taking a very steady approach to making sure that's right before it moves to that space. So I could imagine if you had to push me to it, I think in some years' time, we'll probably definitely see students or a student version of NotebookLM or a slimmed down version or a version where they can only use the chat. But at this point, it's 18 plus. So that's Alan's question. S. McDonald's that are doing good questions. Does it have the facility to generate questions or tasks from the notebook? Yes, you could ask it to generate a set of questions. In that prompt at the bottom, you could ask it to generate a set of questions. So in the previous times, I've uploaded material for a course and then said, could you generate me 10 multiple choice questions with answers and tell me what the correct answer is that students should be able to answer based on this material. And it will then generate those questions for you. So absolutely, you can ask it to do that. So I think that gets us to the end of the questions. Fiona and anyone else on the call, is there anything else we want to add? Let me do a demo of that. It's a good point. Let me do a demo. And in fact, what I'm going to do, if you give me 1 second, is I'm just going to open up a better notebook. Or actually, we'll do it on we'll do it on this one. Okay, so I know it's a more unusual one that it's a school mobile phone policy, but let's do this. Create 5 multiple choice. We'll go for multiple choice at this point. Questions that a user should be able to answer on this policy. So maybe I want to check that my staff have read this thing, that they understand the school mobile phone policy. So I'm going to ask it to create 5 multiple choice questions, and it will create them just in a text format. And then I could export them at this point to something like Google Forms, would probably be the most appropriate one here. So you can see here, it's sort of giving them out to me. So it's given me the questions here, and then I could either pull them in one go down there, copy the whole lot of clipboard, or I could take them out question by question and bring them across to wherever it is I'm going to create that tool. Now, of course, one thing I could do at this point is I could be really crafty. So I'm going to get super advanced level at this point, Fiona, and I'm going to go to Gemini, just to really round this off as a demo. I'm going to go to Gemini, and in Gemini, I'm going to turn on Canvas mode, and I'm going to say, create a quiz based on these questions. And then I'm going to just paste in what we just got, just as it is, to Gemini. And then because I've asked Gemini to create that, I think I had Canvas turned on, but I'll check in a second if I did. What it's going to do on the right hand side is actually create, if you haven't seen this before, I'm using Canvas inside Gemini, and Canvas inside Gemini will build things for me. So I just grab those. This is getting advanced now, but I grab those questions. It's just building the little quiz for me on the right here. And then in a second, when it finishes building the quiz, I've now got a sort of a playable quiz over on the right hand side there. So I could then at this point grab that and share that. I could put that in my school on a probably internal site, given it's the staff policy. I've already put it on an internal site in a Google site somewhere so that people can just do it. It's a little interactive. I don't know what the answer is now. It's a little interactive quiz that staff can go through and use that way. So you could do that with it, and that's a quick way. If someone says to me, what's a quick flow for doing it? That would be a good quick flow for doing that. sidelined over to Gemini there to show that little demo. But hopefully that answered your question. How would you take the quiz from Gemini to a Google site? To get the quiz from Gemini to a Google site, I'd take I'll show you actually. I'll do that. I'll finish that little demo. Let me go over there again. I will, on this page, I just go here to code. I just copy the code, go to Google Sites, and you can put a code brick in and put it into a site that way. So I just take the raw code to do that way. It'll be probably the quickest way of getting it across. Oh, there's a share button. Let me see if I can do that. Yeah, copy the content. So you share, copy, and go that way into sites. It's probably the best thing, but you can put code in lots of things, and lots of different tools on the web have embeddable code. So you could sort of take it to lots of places. Sites being the logical one, because then you can lock down the users that can access it, particularly if your policy's one of concern. Hopefully that answered that question. Any other questions from anyone in the chat? Now's your chance. Oh, copyright issue. That's a really good point and really good question from DK there. So you need to be mindful of the resources that you're uploading into NotebookLM, like with any AI tool, to be fair. Same with Gemini, same with all the other products that are out there. NotebookLM itself is what we call an internal tool. So when you're putting something into it, it's like putting it in your drive. But different publishers would have different responses to that. So I can't say it's the same for every response, but if you've got school-wide licenses for things, that's usually okay for use. But obviously, if something is an individual use item, it should only be used by you in its current format. So you'll have to look at your individual resources for that. It doesn't play the video, but takes content as, I'm not sure that might be answered something from an early question. Oh, in terms of the video, someone said, is the video, if you're putting a YouTube video in, then you obviously it needs access to the video. So that's normally have to be a YouTube public, or anyone with a link can view video for YouTube. It won't play videos within itself. It will just upload them as sources. So it will read them in as text, I would imagine, as audio transcribed text is the answer to the video question. Right. Well, myself and Fiona will hang around. Is there anything, Fiona, I've missed from questions? I know you've been following the chat.
I think there was someone called out the mind map feature, and I'm not sure if I missed it, but I know that Pam has made some amazing mind maps of enormous amounts of policy documents and digital strategy and so on. Can you just show folks how to do the mind map? Yeah,
we saw it earlier briefly, Fiona, on when we were making the school mobile phone policy.
Sorry.
So we went to, it's all right. We went to mind map at the bottom of on the chat page here. Sometimes it says at the top here, the mind map button. There it is there. There's a call out. It creates a mind map, which will then look something like this to enable us to create the content, and we can branch this down into lots of areas. Let me make that big again. Oops. Make that big. There we go. I can branch this mind map down to different areas. And then when we're happy with the mind map, we can download it with this area to bring it up as an image. So that is mind map creation. Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon to take a look into NotebookLM. What really excites me about it as a product is it we're really at the start of this, and I can really sort of imagine the uses are already quite a lot. And as we see the product develop, new features will get added into Glow, into the Glow version of NotebookLM. So good luck everybody with your notebook use, and feel free to share back with the team the different ways you're using it to support teaching and learning in your school. Thanks for joining us everybody. See you all soon.
Thank you so much.
And what I really should do, Fiona, is put these slides into NotebookLM so we can have a summary and a podcast about what I talked, and this video about what I talked about today.
We will be sharing the video via the Glow team. I'll just stop the recording now.